All right, in this episode, we are just going to go over the personal space rhetorical analysis assignment sheet. This assignment sheet, which is available on Canvas now and in a link down below, you can easily see that we have created a new ultimate paper that you'll turn in at the end of the semester with a very different direction than we were taking before. Now, in a previous video, I did talk about my thinking behind this, why I made this decision. So if you're still a little bit confused about that, you can go back and rewatch that video. But ultimately, I felt like it was not reasonable to continue on with such a complicated assignment that does require you being on campus to complete. So instead, we've sort of shifted our focus towards a paper that will ultimately let us accomplish a lot of the same goals. And we are basically starting from scratch right now in a paper that we can easily write in these remaining 5 weeks. Now, the basic assignment, as you can see here on the assignment sheet, students are going to develop an essay that explains to a neutral audience, and we'll talk about what that means coming up, what their personal space seems to be arguing about them to visitors. What I mean by personal space can mean a lot of different things. For me, my personal space is this loft in my apartment. Most of my stuff goes up here. I spend my free time, my alone time up here. I spend time with my family in here. And I'm surrounded by things that I enjoy. It's a place where I feel comfortable and relaxed. And so yours could be your dorm, your bedroom at home, maybe even a space at work, like your office, that you feel like you can really express yourself. Where you choose doesn't matter. All that really matters is that we find out what that space means about us, right? Now, as you can see here in my assignment sheets, I always like having this getting ideas section so that we can sort of get in the same headspace in terms of where the assignment is coming from. Now, I'm going to read this to you here so that we have an audio version of it, but so we can go through it like we did in person. I mentioned early in our semester that there's this idea that everything is an argument, from obvious explicit arguments like advertisements, reviews, campaign slogans, documentaries, to less obvious implicit arguments, things that don't even seem like arguments at first. I used in class examples of how we dress, the stickers on our laptops, things we choose to post on social media, as ways we make implicit arguments about ourselves. Whether intentional or not, every day we are presenting a particular self-image that we're trying to get other people to accept as accurate. As the authors of Everything's an Argument explain, the clothes you wear, the foods you eat, and the groups you join make nuanced, sometimes unspoken assertions about who you are and what you value, because an argument merely expresses a point of view. So then we might find it fruitful as a way of practicing our ability to recognize and break down even the subtlest arguments, is to break down an argument that's very close to us, our own personal spaces. In his book, Snoop, What Your Stuff Says About You, Professor of Psychology from the University of Texas, Sam Gosling, argues that we, quote, piece together bits of evidence wherever you can find them to form coherent portraits of the characters who populate our social spheres. You draw on information from your long history with dear old friends and make snap judgments from thin slices of behavior in brief social interactions. And I'm sure we've all felt that subtle anxiety when a new friend or a date comes back to our rooms for the first time, whether it's our dorm or a bedroom at home. In fact, there was a whole reality dating show where a contestant would judge their dates solely by their bedrooms. They would actually have the person, like the three contestants in a van, watching the footage of their prospective date visiting their bedrooms and just judging everything about them based on what was in their room. It was called Room Raiders. It ran for a long time, 2003 to 2009. I put a link to a clip on YouTube to sort of get a sense of what that looked like. But it's obviously something that is pretty innate in our social interactions. But so our goal for this assignment is to break down major aspects of a personal space of our choice. It can be a bedroom, a personal den, a dorm room, even an office or a cubicle, anywhere you spend a lot of personal time where you feel safe and comfortable. What we want to do is make observations about how you've chosen to decorate the space, the items you've chosen to put in the space, and how you typically use that space. Then we can try and connect the dots between those observations and the way we see ourselves. We can even practice our skills in analyzing potential audience questions by challenging our own self-interpretations of our spaces and think about ways they could potentially be misinterpreted and provide a counter-argument to their hypothetical impressions. Now, this is intended to be a lower stress, fun, and introspective assignment. I don't want students to reveal things about themselves that are overly personal, overly sensitive, or difficult. Indeed, during this time of social isolation, since we are spending more time in our personal spaces, it should be about exploring what solace we can find in our personal safe spaces. Indeed, for people who suffer from anxiety and panic attacks or disorders, they're often encouraged to practice a grounding technique that is all about helping maintain a sense of personal place to stave off that anxiety. It's called the 5-4-3-2-1 coping technique for anxiety. You acknowledge 5 things you can see around you, 4 things you can touch around you, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. Ultimately, we should use the assignment more to celebrate our personal spaces and the parts of ourselves we want to communicate and to emphasize. So what do I really want in this assignment? And I want to make it as clear as possible that this assignment is intended to be less intensive than the proposal, but no less a formalized essay. We are going to write an essay that's utilizing our knowledge of rhetorical appeals, ethos, logos, and pathos, as well as audience-based reasoning and some research. Some areas that need to be addressed are as follows. Obviously, we need an introduction. It will briefly impress upon our reader the general idea of our essay. What space are we writing about? We want to describe where it is, how you tend to use it to forecast the rest of the essay, which will focus on the smaller details. Ultimately, you want to lead your reader to a thesis statement that states broadly what you feel your space says about you, your personality, your values, and what elements of that space you're choosing to highlight as evidence. Your supporting reasons in this essay, the central claim needs to be supported by a number of reasons that illustrate that central claim. Supporting reasons are intended to illustrate to your audience what each major aspect of your space says about you, using observation and description and/or images to help support your thinking. You should additionally explain your interpretation of your space with personal anecdotes and some secondary research. But don't worry, I've conducted quite a lot of secondary research for you. We'll look at that in a minute. But each supporting reason or aspect of your space will have at minimum 1 paragraph on which it focuses. Conditions of rebuttal. In any argument, you need to be prepared for a potential resistant audience. In the case of this essay, one may wonder how someone could argue against your own personal interpretation of your own personal space. But we should be prepared to anticipate someone who interprets things differently, or who would argue that it says something different about ourselves. Imagine someone coming into your space without you there to guide them or to curate the experience. What would they think? How would they react? What conclusions would they draw about you? If they're interpreting things in a way that you wouldn't like, or that you feel conflict with your own self-image, how would you respond? There's actually research that shows that a lot of frustration and anxiety comes out of people misinterpreting or disagreeing with their own self-image. So this might be the opportunity to actually explore that. Ultimately, your conclusion is intended to answer the question, so what? So in our case, we can use the conclusion as a space to reflect and meditate on what we perhaps have discovered about ourselves. Are you confident in what your space says about you? Did you find things that you would change about your space to more accurately reflect that self-image? Those are things that we can put into our conclusion. Now, it is important to note that this assignment is still going to accomplish a lot of the objectives that we set out for our proposal. We're going to be able to construct an argument using a clear, focusing thesis for a neutral audience. We want to support an argument utilizing both primary and secondary research as evidence. We want to be able to identify potential audience concerns or questions and provide rebuttal or concessions. We want to be able to utilize focusing techniques for global and local organization and practice citation and documentation strategies employed by the expectations of the rhetorical context. Now, the problem areas here is blank because this is a new assignment. I want to fill this as we move forward. So in some ways, this is kind of an experiment. It's a new assignment that I created last week. And so as problem areas arise, I will add it to this assignment sheet and make sure that I communicate that to everybody so that we're all on the same page and we're all learning from this experience. And that requires communications. So if you have questions or concerns about your paper, about checkpoint assignments, about anything conceptually, or you just want to talk about ideas, don't hesitate to reach out for personal conferences. I enjoy talking to students about their work. Just because we are physically distancing ourselves, that doesn't mean that we have to isolate ourselves. So reach out, email me to request personal conference times, and this can be accomplished in whatever format you feel the most comfortable with, including email, instant messaging or chat, and video conferencing via Zoom, or whatever else you're comfortable with. Ultimately, this is going to wind up being about 1,500 to 2,000 words, plus an MLA formatted works cited page for any secondary source that's consulted. Now, we can talk in a later video once we've done more work on this assignment and talk in more detail about the rubric, but it is very similar to the rubric that I shared with you for the proposal assignment. It's just that this consistent column here now adds up to the 100-point total that the assignment is worth. So you can read through that on your own time, and I'll make a future video where we talk about it in detail, especially when we talk about workshopping. But the last thing I want to show you in this video before it gets too long is actually a bibliography of research that I conducted when I was trying to conceptualize this assignment. I'll show you some strategies later on on how to take these sources and actually draw material from them to help support our argument. Now, you feel free to conduct secondary research as you see fit, but I've already tested your ability to conduct secondary and primary research, and so I'm not going to expect you to conduct additional research if you don't want to. I expect you to integrate secondary research, so you will be using some of this material in your paper. But like I said, I've conducted a considerable amount of research here for you to draw from. So feel free to read through these. I'm going to be putting these in the supplementary readings sections on our schedule. You can use your extra time at home to read through some of these to get ideas, as well as better understand maybe where this concept is coming from. before this video is getting too long, I'm going to let it go at that. If you have any questions or concerns about this assignment sheet or about the direction that we're headed, please come to an office hours live stream or reach out via email and we can talk about it. I don't want anybody feeling stressed about this. It's a clean slate and I'm going to teach you everything that you need to know. I'll see you in the next video.